from Bombay. Go ahead, Gurudas.
You are on, ma'am.
So we start with playing the video of the library of the distinguished institution you're in at the moment. Gurudas, if we can have that video of the library subcommittee. Thank you.
Welcome to the oldest social and business club in India, the Bengal Club. Set up in 1827 as a meeting place where people from the military, the judiciary, businessmen and professionals of the British Empire gathered together. Independence brought about a change in clientele, but not in character. Professionals, businessmen, people from the service sector, bureaucrats, and academics started rubbing shoulders in the corridors of this hallowed institution. Welcome to the library of the Bengal Club, an institution within an institution. A veritable collection of books, the like of which you're unlikely to find anywhere else in the city, and indeed in this country. Recordings by famous speakers who have spoken here in the library, and a collection of books on any subject that you may want to look for. Books by Nobel laureates, books by Bengal Club members, books on political science, philosophy, ethics and morality, food and drinks, sports and culture. Mention the subject and it's available here. There is also a small Wi-Fi corner where you can browse the internet in peace. They said there is no subject under the sun. If you're looking for a book, you will find it on these shelves of the Library of the Bengal. Envy the books, enjoy the collection, but above all, celebrate in the ambience of this wonderful library, the Library of the Bengal Club. Welcome to see the other famous individuals who have launched their books on this site. And recordings of that book launch are also available in this library. Welcome to the Library of the Bengal Club. On behalf of the Library Subcommittee, welcome to this program.
So here we are, starting off in April 25, very much in the center of celebrations for Earth Day. Chris Marsh, howdy, all the way from England. Welcome here. Chris is a permaculturist, and I'm hoping we're going to hear more about that on the ecology. So it's rather interesting that the news has been trenchant, concise, and full of positives and negatives. This morning, the papers carried a story about the second cheetah, which India had brought in, having died. So whether it was caused by ecological differences, or whether it was habitat, or just as it happened, these are issues that we are thinking about as to how we can live with more efficacy with biodiversity. Each of us here today is committed in some way or the other. And all of you know that now is the time that we seriously have to think about global warming and all the negatives that come with unthinking, greed, the idea of the Anthropocene, which we think human beings have a right and an entitlement to the planet that no other species has. I recall reading about Gerald Durrell's guru, and I think more of that will come to us from a master's student who specializes in issues of ecology and performance, who's here with us here today, Anushka. Gerald Durrell's guru, so to speak, the American ecologist William Beebe, once said, if we lose a species, it doesn't really mean we've lost a species. It means we've lost a part of the planet. So without further ado, I want to celebrate first two of the Bengal Club writers who have written about animals. One is Anjana Basu, who's well known, renowned as a poet in this city. We come from the same school, many of us who are here, Loreto Convent, Loreto House in Kolkata. Anjana has a colorful career. She's traveled, she's studied in England, and she's come back, and for many years, she's in advertising. Apart from advertising, in the last few years, she's contributed to the cause of young adults getting to understand how the work and the mind and the life of carnivores like leopards and tigers work. So I will first let Anjana have the floor and tell us about how she thought about, conceptualized the idea of the tiger and the leopard in her imagination and how she came upon to write these stories. After Anjana has finished, Anju Munshi, who's one of our book club regulars with great insights, will do an exposition and explication on Anjana's book, specific book on In the Shadow of Leaves. So Anjana, take it away. And I'm afraid I have to be bad cop to incorporate all our voices this evening. So 4 to 5 minutes is what each of us gets in the scheme of things. Yes, Anjana, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Julie, for that introduction and handing me over to the floor on this wild evening. Welcome to all our international speakers from at different points in time. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Okay, we are on the heels of Earth Day. We are at a time when Project Tiger, for example, just completed 50 years of being. And Project Tiger's 50 years of being has thrown up statistics that the tiger population in India is going great guns. And Sundarbans has its full quotient of tigers. Right, that's one level of things. At another level, which nobody really understands or actually doesn't go into, that in all this hoo-ha about tigers, the leopards, poor things, get forgotten, and leopards are not counted. In fact, they are looked upon as the scavengers, particularly in the tea gardens of North Bengal, where they hop in and hop out and generally drive everybody bananas. There are also the urban leopards of Bombay, who share walls with people. They skip out from the Sanjay Gandhi National Park and visit multi-stories, not with great results all the time. But then again, in case people may or may not be surprised, LA has a cougar population and LA has urban cougars. So Bombay and LA have the same issue with carnivores. However, our leopards are not doing well. Our leopards need to do well because they are part of this planet. And yes, of course, there are the cheetahs. India lost its cheetah. In fact, Asia lost its cheetahs a long while ago. The experiment of bringing them back and introducing them to this space has been tried. Unfortunately, Kuno National Park is too small for the cheetahs. Uday, according to the vet, died of food poisoning. The other one died of a kidney problem. But in the meantime, we have some cubs happening, so perhaps we will be able to do something about it. Anyway, all this being the general background, why did I start writing about tigers? I started actually before the tiger population had gone up. I'm not quite sure if I would have done it now, but there's no point thinking about that one. I happened to have gone to Nainital with a friend. We were talking ghosts. And we ended up, because in Nainital, when you're talking ghosts, you end up talking about Jim Corbett's ghost. And my friend said, I will give you a challenge. Why don't you write about Jim Corbett's ghost? What would he do? So having thought over that one, I thought that, okay, if Jim Corbett came back as a ghost, quite obviously he would be helping tigers, people, leopards, and the things he tried to do before. But now he's doing it in ghost form, which makes it slightly different and I think for children more entertaining, actually. So that went into In the Shadow of the Leaves, where this tiger gets out of Corbett. And In the Shadow of the Leaves was actually written before I'd gone to Corbett National Park. And anyway, so I wrote it, said it's fine, people like it, yay, whoa. Then I actually went to Corbett National Park, and the next thing that happened was that a tiger got out of Corbett. So I said, okay, I think Carpet Sahib's ghost is trying to say, okay, you did a decent job. So you may see what happens when a tiger gets out. So that leopards, it is always, I mean, there are leopards getting out. Leopards, as I said, they get into places. They got into the IIT Powai lab, for example. So I had another leopard, and since we are still dealing with Corbett's ghost, I had to get into a school in Nainital and what happened there. And all these episodes were to try and get children to understand that animal-human conflict happens. Now, how do you deal with it? Actually, you are trespassing on their property for the most part. Once upon a time, people gave wild animals their space, and there wasn't so much of this. Now we're in a world where India has just become the most populous country. So that means everybody is bursting at the seams, and we're going to be running into more tigers, leopards, elephants, and everybody is going to have hysterics. Even the cheetahs, poor things. One of them went to visit a village. So unless we learn to deal with this, we are really going to be in a problem area. The answer is not to kill off animals. And unfortunately, people will say we're being run over by elephants. No, somebody got eaten up by a tiger. No, let's get rid of them. So we have to now sort this situation out for generations to come and our current planet. Right?
Perfect. Perfect, Anjana. You've put us on the page where we want to be. And if our techie wizard, Mr. Gurudas, is around, may I ask you to play first the leopard, the Jawai leopard short clip, followed by the Wonder Woman elephant clip, after which Anju Munshi will be speaking about Anjana Basu's book. Thank you. Mr. Gurudas, can we play? I think I'd mentioned 5.15 till 5.15 minutes till about 7 minutes on the video. Thank you. Go ahead, keep playing. Thank you, Gurudash. I think we can call that day. I want you all to notice, to think about the language. At the University of Toronto, where Harish and I both attended classes on ecology and elephant behavior, this is one thing that came to mind when I was preparing for this for you. It is the connection that a human being makes with that wild animal. And for 1 minute, we can't forget that that animal is wild. But there is no place for superiority. There is no place for feeling that the Anthropocene is the superior being. Because very easily that elephant could crush who we call the Wonder Woman in Thailand and Khao Yai. Keeping this in mind, the other explications will be on the books by Anjana and by another member of our club who could not be here with us, tremendously efficacious, lucid, evocative writer, Mr. Molloy Roy. Last night he had an accident, and I think Shudatta, who knows him very well, he's in hospital at the moment, and he's been wanting this book of his, An Anywhere Place, to be discussed for the last 6 months. So I was attracted to his book because he remembered his childhood days in Hazaribagh, where he said he used to come home in the dusk of winter evenings from St. Xavier's Hazaribagh. And once when he was about 10 or 12 years old, he found this leopard with a leopard cub in the front yard. Another time he found a huge black bear. But all he had to do was, a child, innocent mind says, shoo, 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 and there goes the animal. Those days have changed because I think we are clashing at far closer quarters. So all the other stories you're going to hear today too about animal interactions, engagements, I think go back to this Thai woman and how she's managed to set up that connection, the completely wild male elephant. Okay. Yeah, yes. Yes.
Just one observation. If you saw the car that went by, and I was quite surprised to see that the car, they weren't frightened at all. And for them to pass so close to the feet of the elephant, and then the elephant could actually have just kicked and they just went within strike distance and actually stood and then took photographs. I found that quite surprising and impressive in a way.
Did you also notice, Manoj and everybody else, that the first 3 seconds of this clip, which I edited, the first 3 seconds show you how vicious this same elephant is. But something that this woman has in her calms him down. So that's something I thought would be worth thinking about when we are talking about wild things. Incidentally, thanks to Harish, that was the headline when I was looking for a way to put this together. He says, Jimi Hendrix had a very famous song called Wild Thing. You make me smile or you make me sing. You make my heart sing. Yeah. So, okay, much about wild things. Go ahead.
Thank you, Julie. I begin with a warm greetings, a good evening to all the Bengal Club members here and overseas. And honestly speaking, I was very surprised when I realized that I was reading and thinking animals, and I've never done it before. I always thought it's a task which is meant for the children. They should be doing animals, knowing more about them. But thanks to Anjana Basu's book, I think she made me enter the mind space of the animals, especially the tigers, that she writes about. And what a wonderful space I entered. And to quote from the book, she made me see the tailless and the furless and the stupid and the scared human beings, It was a very different experience for me. I quite enjoyed looking at the human beings from the point of view of the animals. And for that, I give the credit to Anjana. Beautifully written and wonderfully expressed for anybody to get into this space with a lot of interest, and also to understand how intelligent the animals are, how disciplined they are, how united they are also. I mean, these are the traits which we find missing in humanity today. Thank you for a wonderful introduction and explanation of your book, Anjana. Next, Molloy Kumar Roy. His take is a little introspective and a little more analytical, because I think there is an underlining emotional story which he plays on, and there is a very interesting and a very convenient mode of human emotions and interplay of different facets of the emotions which he plays on. Arvind, his peer pressure, Birju, I think if I'm not mistaken, Birju is the name. His turmoil within himself about, trapping birds and the kind of, tricks the conscience plays. And conscience can be very tricky, and it can really poke you with its, prickly things, and how he decides to take a very strong decision. Extremely interesting. So by virtue of my marriage, I got planted in a tea garden. I was married to a planter, and I had some amazing and unique experiences in the gardens. Like Anjana said, we used to spot leopards, elephants, monkeys, jungly murgi, monitors, mongoose, snakes everywhere. It used to be like an open jungle for all of us. And for me, it was a kind of an education, because my kids were born there. I grew up in the gardens and things like that. So reading one of the stories, Bholu's friend, is when a little cub gets separated from the parents. And I had a very similar experience. My Mali one day came and he got me a small little cub, and he said, this is a leopard cub. So I said, cannot be, because there are no spots. He said, madam, the spots only come when the leopard cub is 2-3 years older. Till that time, there are no spots on the leopard. It just looked like an ordinary pup to me. So there was great excitement in the family. My 2 boys were very excited, because for them, it was a symbol of power and strength, a leopard cub at home. So, but we didn't realize that this cub was separated from its mother, and that is how it was lying unattended and forlorn in one of the bushes. So from meat to milk, we tried everything. We tried to make it very comfortable. We made a very restful place for the leopard cub. We were like pampering it, fawning over it, but then alas, 2 weeks later, it passed away. So that was a very sad day for the family, and we also gave it a decent funeral. But I'll never forget the kind of conversation my 2 boys had. One said that, Mama, one day it's going to grow up and eat all of us up. So the second one, who was more kind, he said, yeah, but that's tomorrow. Today he's not got his mother with him, so let's look after him. So these little things, I think it drew a lot of empathy from the 2 boys, and I really appreciated that. So elephants, I mean, I could have been an elephant whisperer, but I didn't have the initiative and this Oscar skills, So they were the film says, many experiences, very disciplined, very organized. I mean, they used to understand which part of the army cantonment had rum, and rum bottles used to be pulled down. And the army got into trouble because one fine morning they had no rum in the canteen, because the elephants decided to raid and, make the best of it. Bananas, rum, all these things were their favorites. And the day came when we had to relocate from the gardens to Calcutta. We left everything behind. We came here. It was time for the children to be interviewed in a school. So my son he was 3.5 years old in all. And he went to a very famous, well-known school in Calcutta called the Miranda School. And there, a very formidable, elegant lady, Mrs. Chaudhary, I think. So she was interviewing him. And look at the coincidence. The first page of the picture book was a leopard. So she says, what is this? He said, this is a leopard. And she said, where is it found? He said, in my house. So she looked at me a little frightfully. I mean, is this weird or is it wild? What is it? And then it went off to flowers, vegetables, colors, and things like that. And the last picture was an elephant. And he said, what is it now? He says, this is an elephant. Where does it stay? It comes to my house, finishes all my bananas, and I don't like it anymore. You know, that kind of a thing. By this time, me and my husband were looking at each other and wondering, you know, this is not going to happen. This school is not going to work for us. So I would, you know, it's after so many years, it's taken me down the memory lane. It's been fabulous. I collected so many experiences, but once you leave the estates, you come to a city, you leave it all behind, you forget. Thanks to the authors who we've been honored to be spending time with. Who else can I thank much more than whatever? That's Dr. Julie Banerjee Mehta for getting these books for us to read and go down the fabulous, fabulous memory lanes that we had made for ourselves. Thank you so much, everybody.
Wonderful, Anshu. What a lovely personal engagement that was. I want to turn to an old friend, a renowned lady in the city who inspires us all. Have you brought the book, madam? She's just launched. I'm not going to give my copy to anybody in a hurry. So this is the book she launched. What I find quite mesmerizing, it's called 76 Garden Reach. It's a spectacular garden. And it's not a garden, if you're looking for dahlias and roses, that's not what it's about. It's about living, cohabiting with the most beautiful spice trees, ancient trees, and indigenous trees. So what you see is a celebration of our traditional flora and fauna. And she has Bham, whom we, my partner and I are always complaining because they smell up our garden, you know, Bhamir gondo of that, bhater gondo, the smell of cooked rice. But she's in complete accord. She feeds them. She has eagles. She has pythons. She has emus. But what is spectacular is that she has written this charming little book with her granddaughter, Sana Bhualka, who is now in Oxford. But it is a legacy, I think, for all of us to see if we can in some way inspire the younger generation. May we have a mic here? Lata, would you like to say a few words, please? No, please. No, please. Please. How did you think of the book?
No, so I thought of the book because the garden I inherited was a typical English garden. It had the, you know, the prize dahlias and keep of the grass and everything. So I just thought that it is not what it should be. So I turned it into a forest, and I would call it an organized wilderness now. So then there is the noises of the forest noises are there, the lichen developed, and it was certified, the air quality was certified by the botanists from the botanical gardens. And I get children, so I just want to teach them, I just want to make them value these kind of trees. And it is full of fruit trees. I just put them so that the birds would come, the bats would come, and that's it. So it's an inspiration to children and everybody alike.
I think the most wonderful thing is that you have a heart which is large, which is so large. Lata, I've always seen your garden with kids from the neighborhood, kids who are underprivileged, kids who are the children of prostitutes, but who get such joy from playing all around that huge garden of yours.
It's because it is, I mean, it is for everybody, no?
Yes.
It
yes.
is not yours and mine.
Yes.
So I think God has given it to me for to share with everyone.
Wonderful.
That's the,
wonderful.
That's
Thank you.
All of you are welcome to have a look.
Gurudash, may I beg you to play that 1-minute clip of Born Free, because the next speaker, Anasuya Pal, is going to talk about the book, which is iconic, and you can't talk about wildlife writing without the Joy Adamson story. So enjoy.
I am Joy Adamson. and for many years my home has been in the northern province of Kenya.
I have a little something for you.
We'll feed you. We'll make you strong and healthy. My favorite was the smallest, Elsa. A weakling in size, but the bravest of them all. She was beginning to realize that there was another life than the one we had been living together. That evening, we suffered all the agony of parents whose teenage daughter is out on her first date. The time was approaching when our lives would be changed forever.
The point is that you can't keep Elsa any longer. I'm sorry, but I think you've got to find some zoo that will take her.
I didn't want her to go to a zoo. I want to set her free. We took her out for what became her most dangerous and final test.
We made her tame, and it's too late to try to let her go wild now. And is freedom so important?
Yes, she was born free and she has the right to live free.
Born free as the wind blows, as free as the grass grows, born free to follow your heart.
Thank you, Gurudash. Anasuya, take it away.
Thank you, Julie.
And the fact that you've lived in South Africa and you've had so many wonderful encounters with wild animals, I think will give us a new perspective.
The terrain there was immediately very reminiscent of Kruger National Park. And I mean, such an old movie, but the magic is still alive. And I mean, with today's story in the paper about the cheetahs and how they died, and Joy Adamson with her initial effort, I mean, I don't think there is a record of any other conservationist making the effort to put the animal back in the natural habitat. And that was an experiment which she really fought hard to achieve. And she succeeded. In fact, while studying or reading about this and seeing some videos, I realized that, both Joy and George Adamson, Joy Adamson quite accidentally became a conservationist. She was a naturalist, and her life with George Adamson and the accidental killing of Elsa's mother while she was protecting her cubs made her find her mission in life. And she brought these cubs, and two of the bigger ones were, it was necessary for them to be shifted to Rotterdam Zoo because it was not tenable to bring them up in captivity. And they managed to keep Elsa and managed to teach her life skills enough for her to sustain herself independently in the wild. And through all of these little documentaries that I was studying, it was actually, now when I look at it, I think they did such a fabulous job, both Joy Adamson and her husband, jointly and separately. Because later on, it turned out that although they're wild animals, they did have a bonding with both Joy and George, which was quite something that was never experienced earlier and unexpected. And later on, I saw something about this cub called Bugsy, who was being raised by George Adamson, and the playfulness and the trust with the human carer. And they all go into the wild. And the touching story about Elsa is that she has cubs and she brings her litter back to the to the precincts of the camp, and Joy gets to photograph them from a distance. So it's rather it's a very different aspect of the bonding between the wild animal and the human. And contextually, I mean, this was a period when Kenya was under colonization of the British, and there was this obvious dynamic of a racial superiority of the white over the native black population. And there were a lot of imbalances, and conservation in those days was not top on the priority list of any government. And while the British were still the colonizers, they did have funding, but after the independence of Kenya, much of the funding towards all these parks also reduced. And the natural
poverty of East Africa affected the general well-being of man and beast. And therefore, natural illnesses, the way the animal form of malaria took away Elsa when she was not even 5 years old. These calamities happen amongst the wild. And there is also poaching. There are these farmers who have herds, and the herds are often attacked by these animals, and they poison these wild animals to save their herd of animals. So man and beast don't really live together in a very symbiotic manner. There's often, a grabbing of resources by either. And I think that battle is still going on. It's a battle for survival of races, on various levels. And these experiments, like what has happened with trying to reinstate the cheetah population in India, will happen. And now there's a little bit of a happiness from the cubs that happened. So we will see such things come and go. And one other take I took from while exploring Joy and George's lives was human passion. And that can be a saving grace under circumstances where there is so much of human dominance over the planet. So it is people with a passion to save wildlife, to save the natural environment, like you've done with your garden. It's these things that bring sanity back into the ecosystem and bring some balance. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, Anasuya. I think you've opened the gates for Rohinton Babakon and for Manoj Mohanka to speak of their close contacts. Some really weird that Rohinton is first going to tell you. Rohinton's been in tea forever. He's really, he's an iconic figure in Calcutta in the tea industry. And later you will hear from Manoj Mohanka on what kind of growing up years he had when was it your uncle, Manoj, or your father? It was your father who had a bonding with a leopard. Anyway, Manoj after Rohinton Babakon and his experiences in the tea estates. Go ahead.
Thank you, Julie, and welcome to all of you abroad and also people who are here in Bengal Club. I really don't know where to start. I joined tea when I was about 21 years old.
Rohinton, you'll have to hold it close.
And I was posted to a garden, which is right in the middle of a forest, both sides. So it was quite often that you saw leopards coming into your house, running along your car when you came back from club in the night, till you jumped off the drain. And I really don't know where to start. We just lived with the wild animals. But let me tell you a story of how we coexisted. We'd gone to the north bank, that is on the other side of the Brahmaputra River, for a sporting event in a club in the winter. And in the evening, after lunch, we were having a sort of, some people playing cards, some people were, and this bungalow of the manager was what they call a plinth bungalow. There are two types of bungalow, a chung bungalow, which is on stilt, and the other one, which is just about 3 to 4 feet high. They're all high, they're never at the ground level. So, and on that polished terracotta red floor was a small little carpet and a small Pekingese dog looking at the sun setting, while the men were in that big hall behind the bar, grabbing a bit of a gimlet or what, a beer, while the ladies were chit-chatting and others were playing cards. The leopards love dogs, you know. So this one, as the sun was setting, crept up and pounced straight onto the dog on the carpet. Dog was smart, jumped off the carpet, and he jumped straight in line with the living room. So in slides the leopard on the carpet, a flying carpet on the floor. And before anybody could notice, they saw this leopard coming right into the living room. Everybody, particularly the men, screams, shouted, the women froze. Both of us were frightened, the human beings as well as the leopard. Turned tail and buzzed off. So that was this was, I'm telling you, coming right into the thing that we actually lived with them. And there are sad stories too, but where I was actually not even 3 months, and a person comes to me in the factory and says, Saab, Hamara Mikey, which is my wife, has been mauled by a leopard and she's lying in the plucking fields. So I said, what am I supposed to do? Call the manager. He said, the manager's gone to the out division, which is half an hour away. No telephones those days. So I said, okay, let me go. I said, what do I do? I must have a gun. Suppose it attacks me. So he said, the Gola is a banker. He has a gun. So I went down, picked up his gun on my new cycle, and he said, Saab, take the cartouche at least. I said, okay, yeah. So it was all basically, I just wanted to protect myself. So, and then I realized I've used guns. I saw it was a very thin one. I realized it was a .16. It's a ladies one. You probably shoot sparrows or pigeons in the old days, you know. So anyway, I said, take care. I went over and people guided me to the place. And suddenly he says, sir, it's here in an opening between the tea bushes. I said, where's the woman? She says, she's lying there. So I walked in and somebody from the top said, please fill up the cartridge in the gun. Okay. So I said, yeah, I didn't know. It was a new gun to me. I didn't know. So anyway, I put the cartridges in and I went and I just stood there. Suddenly I realized I was the only person on the ground in that open area. Everybody was on the trees. So I said, what am I doing here? Before I knew it, the workers, you know, pushed the leopard right towards me. And a few seconds later, I heard the ruffling of the tea bushes and it jumped straight onto me. I didn't know what to do. The gun was on its neck. And it sort of touched me on my chest, on my arm. And I just stood still. I froze. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where the safety was, but I fiddled the safety and both the barrels went off, you know, into the air, of course, because it was the barrel that was on the throat of the leopard, foul smelling mouth. And it just disappeared into the tea bushes again. Anyway, that's what it was. And finally, it sort of went off into the bambooers.
I'm very curious. Nilufer's hiding right behind you there. Nilufer, were you married to him that time? No, this is before your time. Lucky you. Okay, Manoj, I'm really waiting to hear your story.
Sir, please look towards the camera and speak.
So
Thank you.
So my name is Manoj Mohanka. I'm a bit of an interloper here because this is actually my father's story, not quite mine. Mine is Glory by Ricocheted Effect. And you know, many things, many things that have been said. So I'll repeat what I said. I said, I'm really an interloper here. It's actually my father's story. And I'm here by way of Ricocheted Glory and an inability to say no to Dr. Julie Mehta. So my father, you know, was Hazaribagh used to be a national park many years ago. It's since been downgraded to a wildlife sanctuary. And we're talking about the time there was huge amounts of wildlife in Hazaribagh. And my father was a contractor at the Durgapur steel plant, which was just about being built. And the family home was in Jamshedpur. And he used to do this drive at night after finishing work because his family and parents lived there. And once on the way back, and this was late at night, let me add, this is all by way of oral history or oral stories, because I wasn't quite on the scene at the time that this happened. So he was driving back from Jamshedpur to Kolkata, and he was sleeping at the back, and the driver, one ex-army fellow, was at the wheel, Burelal Singh. And Burelal Singh, and even if you're asleep and the car has stood still for an extended period of time, you kind of wake up with a start. And he saw Burelal, the car had come to a dead stop, and the roads were not even half the size apparently that we saw with the elephant. And there was a leopard with 2 cubs that had blocked the entire road. And Burelal had quite forgotten his army training and was frightened as hell. So, those days, my father had a .32. I wish I had brought it. I still have it with me. And he fired unthinkingly, lack of whatever understanding, he fired it in the air, and the leopard, the mother leopard, just flew across the gorge. So there was a gorge on one side and water on the other, and that gorge then expanded into the forest. And there was no way that the leopard was really coming back. But my father says he waited for 2 or 3 hours to see, just glued at that spot, hoping that the mother leopard would come back to the cubs. But they also knew that the cubs were so tiny, had they left them behind, those cubs would have been either run over by a vehicle or predated. So he took both these cubs. The next stop after Hazaribagh is a small place called Asansol. So he stopped in Asansol, bought milk bottles and milk. And surprisingly, unlike the story that or your experience, both the leopard cubs were fed and then brought home, much to my mother's annoyance. And she was quite worried because I had an older sister who was quite frisky. This leopard, cub, so there were 2 leopard cubs. One of them was taken away by my uncle Julie, who you mentioned, but that one didn't survive. But this other one that my father had and took so much care of, he tells me that at that time, they spent 900 rupees worth of mutton a month in 58, 59, 60, which was a fairly, and they ensured that there was not a spot of blood in the mutton. That was the one way that the leopard would be, say, protected or not turn man-eater. And the other thing that I want to mention is we also had an Alsatian and a golden retriever, and these 3 creatures lived in perfect harmony, unlike the Pekingese dog that was attacked. So 2 or 3 other small things before I know my time is up on this. One, the fellow was completely domesticated, right? So he knew how to salute. He knew how to sit on a plastic chair as opposed to a steel chair, as opposed to a wooden chair. He knew how to bring a pebble versus a stone. And my father's fame in that area spread, and he began, in the vernacular, there isn't a separate word for leopard. So he became famous in that geography as Bagh Babu. And we had any number of visitors who would come, and there were a whole lot of Goras who were there. And my father was a small-time engineer come contractor at that stage. But when Queen Elizabeth, so the piece de resistance was when Queen Elizabeth came in 1961 to Durgapur, my father was introduced to her with great pride that he's a man with a pet leopard. And apparently now, I don't know how far this is true, and I'll end on this note. My father says Queen Elizabeth was really keen on visiting our home to see the leopard, but her entourage protested, hugely and didn't allow that to happen. then with the flux of time, Durgapur grew into a big place. Leopards, as you know, are full grown within 9 months. And this fellow was with us for about 7.5 years. And there were huge protests, and under the the Wildlife Act had not been promulgated until then, but there was a Forest Act based on which you weren't allowed to keep creatures of this kind in small towns or cities. So my father had, unfortunately, much to his dismay and broken heart, give the leopard away. And so that's been our experience growing with a leopard. And many of the things that I saw in the documentary and that the others have said, it resonates hugely.
You can see why Manoj Mohanka is not just a wildlife enthusiast, but he is an exceedingly well-respected entrepreneur. And he's, I'm especially privileged that he's here because, this is not one of those events which I planned. We'd have big name authors and wildlife enthusiasts and photographers. One of them is sitting right here, Mr. Vivek Krishna, all the way in Bangalore. But Vivek, we will have you, no running away. And why he is Manoj is such a well-established entrepreneur. And he is, to me, the epitome of Kipling's words, that he can be friend to the lowliest and to the highest. And I think your father probably had something to do with that. Okay, so Vivek, are you going to be kind and share all your travels? Would you like to share one story perhaps with us?
Well, certainly, Julie, thank you very much. That is a very generous introduction. I carry a camera. I'm not much of a photographer actually, but I do like the open spaces, and I've had the privilege of getting that experience right from childhood onwards. We brought up in Delhi when Delhi was a very green city. We used to go out, you drove out within 15 minutes, you were out in the fields. I remember driving on the way to Palam Airport, and there were people in the fields on either side where they were out shooting pigeons and partridge, etc. Now, of course, completely banned. You can't carry a gun anywhere near there. And apart from that, in school, I was in a boarding school for 7 years, and we had a very progressive headmaster. And we were actually introduced to the great outdoors by him. There was a lot of outdoor activities, camping, rock climbing, mountaineering, which has stayed with me actually. Now when I look back on it, that's probably where the love of the mountains came for me. Along with that, of course, all of us, I think, have had the experience of having, if not a wild animal, you've certainly had dogs and cats, and that's something that we always had as well. We'd had one long journey, I think, in the early 80s, where we drove from Calcutta to Corbett as a family, Brinda and our 2 elder daughters, and our dog. So we drove all the way to Corbett and we drove all the way back. The dog was a black and white Cocker Spaniel, and he was a huge hit. He was a huge hit on the way back, because wherever we stopped to let him out onto the sides of all the villagers used to gather, because they thought, this is some very hairy species of goat, they thought, but so we also I made the mistake actually. I didn't should have been more. Should have thought about it a bit more. But we went actually up to Corbett with the dog, and when we tried to enter Corbett National Park, those days you could stay inside Corbett National Park in Dikala, and of course the guard said, sorry, you can't take a domestic animal into the national park. And I said, what am I to do? I'm miles away, so I can't abandon the dog. I have to take the car in. So they said, no, you'll have to leave him here at the gate. We drove into the camp, and I said, I'll pick him up the next morning. I'll drive back. I mean, that seemed to be the shortest trip you'll ever make to a national park. But when I got there in the morning, the chap said, it's okay, you can take him in, but if he gets eaten by a leopard, that's that's on you. That's not on us anymore. So he actually went. He spent 3 or 4 days in Corbett Park with us, and of course on the drive back to Calcutta again. Of course, what has happened is that this exposure to the outdoors has given me a great love for being able to get out as often as I can. And I've been able to I go out trekking pretty regularly, which allows you, again, once you're off the main roads and you're out there in the open, the air is so much cleaner. What you see there, you can never see anywhere else. You've got to make the effort of going out and walking and camping. And what I have been able to see in several treks, I made one trek to Antarctica about 6-7 years ago. And there you see wildlife really at close quarters, and they are not scared of human beings because you see too few of them. You go into, I know in South Georgia, where we stopped at one of the grounds where penguins roost and have a huge rookery. 350,000 penguins in one area, ranging from adults to the chicks. Well, not chicks. The chicks actually look more adult than the adults, because the chicks have a sort of like wearing a great fur coat. So actually, when you see them for the first time, you think this is some other species. It's actually the chicks, but they have this to keep themselves warm in those climates. And it's only when they become adults, they shed the fur coat and they get their swimming feathers, and allows them to become the seafarers that they actually are. So it was quite amazing. And you can walk up to the rules were in Antarctica that you can come up within 15 feet of a wild animal, but if they approach you, it's okay, but you can't get any closer than that. That was a ground rule. And it made for amazing interactions at really close range. Not only penguins, seals, a whole variety of seals. We saw, of course, lots of whales and an amazing topography. Something I highly recommend to anybody going there. Yes, we saw such a variety of bird life. Again, seeing nesting areas, the wandering albatross in the Falkland Islands. Amazing things to see, and I've been very privileged and lucky to see that. And I would certainly recommend it highly for all of you to get out there and get to see the world as it is. It's not just what we have surrounding us. We did make a recent trip, by the way, as Julie knows, that we went up to Ladakh to see the snow leopards, and we were very lucky to see snow leopard 5 times in 7 days. And,
we're going to have you back to show us those slides, and you have to make the trek to Kolkata from Bangalore to speak to us about that.
I'll do that, Julie, definitely. Thank you.
Yes.
I brought this.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. Please come and hold it up. How wonderful. Thank you, Vivek. That was awesome. No, come. This is that was with
My father.
Manoj's father. And he is holding him, right?
Yes.
Yes. Wow. Historic.
So this was Ruby.
Ruby.
I asked my father many times, how did that name come about? But there's no.
Okay,
Ma'am,
so
just hold on, ma'am. Just hold on for a second.
yes.
The camera at your end is off.
Camera at our end is off. What does that mean?
Beyond being pictured.
Okay, so what does that translate to, Gurudas? What do we have to do to be seen? Or do you have to do something?
Ma'am, they have to enable the camera.
Will you enable the camera? Gurudas, let's play the slides, the PowerPoint, the short one for Dr. Harish Mehta, and then
Okay.
he'll talk about it.
Okay.
I'm going to have to really put the stops on Harish and everybody else coming now to 5 minutes.
So, yeah, don't look at the slides now because I'll come to them in a minute. There's a bit of a chronology. So we start with Lucknow. I grew up in an army cantonment.
Hold the mic closer to you.
Yes, I grew up in an army cantonment. My father was in the British Indian Army. He'd fought in the Second World War. And when he returned, he retired in Lucknow. So we were living in this very large house, a bungalow, and there was all manner of wildlife that we grew up with. We learned to live with them. So the wildlife we're talking about is a house where we had local snakes called of course, we had cobras, very large ones, and numbers of them. And we had smaller snakes called ajgars. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the ajgar. It's in the north. No, it's a small, very venomous snake. They call it ajgar in Lucknow. So my mother is in the bathroom, and these are the old British style bathrooms where there's an air vent at the ground level. And so a cobra would come in, mummy would raise her legs, and the cobra would peacefully pass into the house. So when I came home from La Martiniere College, Lucknow in the evening, I asked my mom, so what happened? She said, nothing much, a cobra came by. And I said, then where did he go into the bedroom? So did you call Chaudhary, the man who was taking care of Chaukidar? He said, no, they're all over the place. We never called animal control because there wasn't anything like animal control. You never controlled animals. The cobras, he went into our bedroom and he went out. It's a large house. And those old homes, some of them, one of the main frontage of the house never had a door. It had a jali, huge jali from floor to ceiling, because it's a hot country. And then so the air constantly came in, and that was the reception room. And then there was another room, and the drawing room, which had from there it had a folding accordion door. So I mean, very often on the way back from school on my bicycle, I would see a huge cobra, and I would tell my father, get the hockey stick. And then when he came, I said, no, don't go there. He's just too big. He'll eat us both up. I mean, they were massive. At night, so when my mom and dad used to go for the evening walk, very often she'd tell me that she'd stepped on the ajgar. But even though you stepped on it, and she was sure she stepped on it because it was like a hose pipe, they never retaliated. We never had an incident with a snake or an ajgar or a cobra. So we lived with them, and we didn't get excited, So that cobra that went by every other day when I came back from school, because it was a big driveway from the gate, it was a circular driveway, and then the house was set far back. These were old British style homes. And you never get excited about this. And then I went to work in Singapore for many years, and part of my job was to travel to Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. On my first trip to Laos in the year 1990, I'm taken by some local farmers to a market. They said, we're going to do some shopping before we go home to his house for dinner. And so the market was, it had cobras, monitor lizards. So they bought a monitor lizard, and they tied up the head and tail. His son caught it very roughly, tied up the head and tail with a rope, and tossed him in the back of the pickup. Soon we are in this farmer's house, which is on stilts, and we ate some soup and rice they'd made. An hour later, he said, the monitor lizard is now being prepared. Would you like some? And I poked around, it was white and everything, but I didn't eat it. So this, I mean, just a story to show you how we are consuming everything we can get our hands on. Then in Canada and Mississauga, I had another experience. Can we show some of those slides now? With bird life in the backyard. So, even in Lucknow, the snakes were backyard animals. Like, in North America, we talk about birds and it's all very pretty. And even the raccoons that you see are fairly pretty. And President Roosevelt's wife, Eleanor, even kept one, as you know, as a pet. But in Lucknow, backyard animals were cobras, and they never bit you or you bit them, and you never killed them. So in Mississauga, we had this when we moved into a house. On the first or second day of moving in, he appears, and it turns out that he's living under the patio, which was a wooden patio, and which has an opening on all four sides. So we normally try and block it with blocks of wood, but you can't. Sometimes the wood comes loose because of the wetness and the snow, but they were living under there. This gentleman is the opossum. He's the marsupial with a long hairless tail. He shows up every winter and he looks through our patio door and he wants food. He looks at you beseechingly. And I wanted to feed him so badly, but Julie said, if you feed him once, he is going to want to stay. Can we move to the next one? Okay, I think we missed the raccoon. Can we go back a couple of slides? This one. So the day that we moved into the house, we are sitting there with the real estate agent and Julie and me around just plastic chairs because we haven't got any furniture yet, but we have some wine. And we're having wine and cheese. And 3 or 4 of them turn up, mom, dad, and 2 kids. And they're loping towards us and they want food, they want cheese, they want wine. So I told the housing estate said, I think you better go inside because they might spray us. Now, the problem with that is once they spray you, it sticks to your skin for a long time.
And you need lots of tomato juice to get it out.
So can we go to the birds, please? The next 2-3 slides. Yeah. So then in the spring, so in winter, when the snows are about to melt and the snows are in the last stages of melting, these guys show up. Yeah, the blue jay on the right and the northern cardinal on the left. And then they stay with you throughout the spring and they have babies there. And our backyard used to be full because we used to spend a fair amount on buying suet and buying nuts for them and nigella seeds for the other birds. So, and you got to talk to them. You see, the problem with it's very competitive out there because everybody wants them to come. So everybody's got backyard food. Now, if you want them to come to your backyard, you have to sing. So I learned to speak to them. And this is what the language of the northern cardinal is. Now, when I do that, immediately you get an answer from Breeder's house. And then you talk to him from anywhere, from the bathroom, wherever you are. And within 3 to 10 seconds, he's back, he's there. But the guy is red and his wife is brown. And your local bulbuls are just like them and they make the same noise. So now I'm talking every morning to our Calcutta bulbuls. So I call them and they come in about 30 seconds. And we've got papita and we feed them those plain cream cracker biscuits without salt. So that's this, and they're responding. Can we go back to the pictures, the last of the slides?
You have 2 minutes, Dr. Mehta.
There's a couple of birds there. So the 2 birds we missed, one was the chickadee, which is the black and white little one. Please go forward. This one. This is the chickadee. This one shows up, is very friendly. If I was watering the plants in the backyard, he will sit on your topi. He'll accept food from your hand and all that. This chickadee. I really miss this one. Can we go to the next one? The next, there's the golden one. The golden, yes, that's the goldfinch. Now, this has a very shrill, high sound, very difficult to emulate, and also very elusive. You can't call the goldfinch. You're lucky if he drops in. Now, to go back to the blue jay, Julie had one morning, we had 13 of them descend in the backyard. It's a very weird event, 13. And then we put out the food, and then one blue jay took a fancy to Julie because he fancied she was generous with the nuts, with the peanuts. So he would begin screaming from about a mile away. And he has a raucous screech. I mean, like a crow, loud. And then she knew that he is calling for the food. So she would run out, dropping everything she's doing. She'd run out to feed him. And he'd eat and go away. And the next is the same thing. And so when I complained to her doctoral supervisor, Professor Alan Bewell, that this is what's happening, he told her to stop because he says that this blue jay has you in its command. And if you want to finish your PhD, you'd better stop this because it's not going to take you anywhere. And the same thing happened to me in Calcutta. My mother-in-law scolded me for talking to the birds. She says, what is this? Stop looking at the squirrels. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Maybe you've opened a segue for Shurajit, Dr. Chaudhary, and Rupashri as well. Shurajit is a serious birder, not avant-garde like us, but this couple is wonderful to have here, and they speak at proper birding events. So Shurajit, go ahead, both of you. One second, Gurudas, just whenever Mr. Dr. Chaudhary wants, we can play the slides.
Sure, ma'am.
Thanks.
Please keep the mic closer to your. We can't hear you, sir.
Good evening.
Yeah, please look at the camera and speak.
Oh. All right, so I'll carry on from what Harish has been talking about the birds, and we have been in birding for about last 10 years, and but I don't call myself a serious expert. I'm more of a novice because those who are experts probably they would have seen some 9,000 species in the world, and there are hardly few. And my count would be close to, much less than 1,000. So, so it's not a very. I'm into birding and I love birding. So these are some pictures from Thailand when we were in Thailand. But I just like to talk about the perspective that the love for nature was always there, but since we started birding, I think our perspective changed a whole lot. Before we got into birding, nature was like a very vast thing. Like you have the sky, the land, the sea, the animals, the birds, everything in the nature, and it was very hard to know where to start. And if you look at, that's one side of the story, and the other side is that when we were in forest, typically, our obsession for seeing a cat or a tiger, it kind of obfuscated our view for other things happening in the forest. So we kind of missed out on many things visiting forest. And then one day my son comes to me and tells me that, why don't you get into birding? And he has been, by that time, he was into some kind of survey like tiger census and some survey on slender lorries in Bangalore. And so we said, okay, fine. And then he took us to a place called Andheli in Ganeshguri, in western Maharashtra. And it was a setting of a couple of two hills merging in at a point, and a lot of trees and shrubs. And in front, the resort manager, the property manager, they have set up some bird feeders, and set up a barricade before the bird feeder. And there are a lot of bird activity. That was the target. That was what we were looking for. And we are very new to this process. My son was into it already. But then there were about 30 odd expert birder with big lenses and all, set up on a stand, because the moment the activity starts in the morning, everybody starts shooting and all that. So we were just, quite observer, standing by, observing what's happening. And when the birding activity started, the cameras go on like, with 14 frames a second, it's like a machine gun, right? The clicking like a machine gun, and that's the speed at which this shoot. So, and then they will talk about all the birds they are there. There are 40 species in a span of 1 hour. And we were just awestruck, like, how can they remember the names of all 40 species? Like I said, no way I'm into this, because my memory would fail this kind of test. So, but then after the whole day was over, my son told us, no, don't worry. Like, it's a matter of association. There is a field book. You go look at that field book, and you'll get to it quite very quickly once you understand the different parts of the bird. Like you have the bird body has a different part, like the nape, the beak, the belly, the vent, the rump, and all. This is a different parts of the body. The moment you know about that and associate the structure of those parts, then you get to know the names very easily. So I said, okay, let's give it a try. And then that was the probably start of it. And we learned how to associate. And we learned that, it's easy to remember when we associate. So we got into it, and to our surprise, we kept remembering names and kept photographing them. So that was my first experience into how we got into birding. And we have kept doing that. We have been into, we are lucky that India is a very good place for birding. If you know that if you try to divide the total number of bird count in the world is around 11,000. And in the Eastern hemisphere is about 6,700, and the Western hemisphere, Western is like South and North America. So that's about 6,700. And so in the Eastern hemisphere, India is one of the most prominent country, because after Indonesia, which has got 1,700 species, India has about 1,300 species. 1,300. No, because there is a bird you find in everywhere. So it's starting from Himalayas, a wonderful place. Himalaya is, endless. You can, if you go to Himalayas, it will be like, you can't finish in one lifetime. The amount of the wealth of nature that is there in Himalayas, you can't finish in one lifetime. So, and is the best part is the Himalaya, you get different altitude, and you can go up from the high up from the Sela Pass, or from the very high up to even the foothills of Himalayas. It gives you wonderful variety. And there is a practice of birding in India, so that means that you have certain infrastructure available. So that way, India is a very good place for birding. and of course, if you go to South America, that's wonderful. So that's also there. So I think that's about it.
Surojit, we can listen to you for hours and look at the pictures.
I don't want
But
to.
we're so short of time today. We'll have you over
Sure,
another
sure,
time.
sure.
Would be great. Let's hear Jean Carroll Ewart. If you have anything to share, that would be wonderful. And then Paramita and Chris and Vinod, and then we'll come back to the real life here. So Jean, go first, and then Chris and Paramita and Vinod.
Okay, I will take 2 minutes. Can I share my screen? I want to show you a picture of a piece of wildlife I found in my backyard yesterday. I can't share my screen unless somebody allows me.
Yeah, you can now.
Okay, thank you.
Get together.
Can you all see that?
Laska.
There we go. You can see that? You can't see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Okay, that's me, and that's a yellow rat snake. They're perfectly harmless. I'm in Florida, for those of you who don't remember me from previous meetings. And there are many, many snakes in Florida. I find one in my yard probably every day. This one was particularly large, and she was so elegant. What a beautiful snake she is. So they're perfectly harmless. We encourage snakes to live in our yard. You can see the heavily wooded area behind me. And we keep wood piles there actually to serve as snake preservation areas. She was actually in my hen coop eating eggs, which is why I have her in my hands. Normally I wouldn't have picked her up because it bothers her. But I had to get her out of the hen coop because the chickens wouldn't go up for the night because they were afraid of the snake. She wouldn't harm an adult chicken, but she does eat their eggs and they don't like that. But there are 5 venomous snakes in Florida. None of them would ever be in my backyard. They live in very remote wooded areas, not in urban areas, and 2 of them only live in water. So I knew she was harmless, and I'd seen rat snakes before. She was just a particularly lovely specimen. And for those of you who wouldn't pick up a snake, I grew up in Congo, where my parents were missionaries deep in the interior, and my dad is an avid snake person. He just loves snakes, so he was always bringing them into the house to say, hey kids, look at this. This one's very cool, isn't it? Now he did keep a book of venomous snakes because we had cobras, for instance, that came in the house. So he knew which ones you never messed with. And we had snake safety training. But he taught me to touch snakes and not be afraid of them. And I was not at all afraid to pick her up and take her out of my chicken coop and send her on her way. But now that she knows where the warm eggs are, she'll be back. I expect to see her again. So thank you, everybody. I really enjoyed the stories, and the pictures so beautiful. You guys are such good photographers. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean Carroll. That was wonderful. And I thought Florida only had gators.
Yeah, we have a lot of wildlife. I had a wild turkey in my backyard last week, and I've had once an otter in my pool, but we had to call the wildlife rescue people to get it out because salt water is not good for otters. It shouldn't have been in there. So they came and relocated it to somewhere safer.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paramita, you have a cockatoo or do you have a parrot? You'll have to unmute.
Yes, sorry. No, I have a parrot, but after listening to all of you, I think I'll just talk about something else, a lovely encounter which I had in Kenya. Before that, as all of you know, I am a biologist turned into a poet. I do my humble bit for conservation and awareness about climate change. One of my books, Girls to Hisses and Their Homes, talks about awareness, makes children aware about climate change and conservation. So, I've put things into verse, and I've done this with a UNESCO awarded naturalist. So I'll talk about an encounter which I had in Kenya. We had gone to Kenya a few years back, and we had this guide called Sammy with us. And we had, of course, a safari van to ourselves. And he said, and we wanted to see something interesting, and we didn't see on the first day. So second day, he took us to the interior of the forests. and at Masai Mara, of course. And then we saw a huge herd of elephants out there. And then we were waiting and waiting and waiting, and other safari vans came and, made a queue out there, and they stood out there. And we really didn't know what we were waiting for. And then suddenly a huge pride of lion. They came out from the dense the bushes, 22 of them. There was only one male, huge, obviously, one male lion, and the others were female lionesses and a few young male cubs. And then they sat out there, and we were watching and watching and watching. And suddenly what happened, the elephants started trumpeting, because the elephants had baby elephants with them, calves with them, and they were scared that the lionesses would hurt them. So they went on trumpeting, and the lionesses did not budge. Then the elephants went near them, and gradually, the lionesses moved away from there. So this went on for about 2.5, 3 hours. And then from then on, I knew who is the true king of the jungle. The elephants are the true kings of the jungle, because the elephants just shooed away the lionesses, and they just went away from there. So it was such a lovely encounter, and to know that who is the true king. So it was a wonderful experience in Kenya.
I believe ma'am is just out. Yeah, there it is.
It's
ma'am,
muted.
please unmute. Please unmute. Yeah, you are on, ma'am.
Paramita, can you hear?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, please wrap it up in about 3 minutes, because we've got many voices left. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wrapped it up like we went. Could you hear me? Could you hear me?
No, we missed the story. So maybe you'd like to tell us about the herd of elephants and the queue of... Yeah.
Okay. So when we went out there, we saw a huge herd of elephants with some calves, with some baby elephants out there. And we were just waiting for about 2 hours. And then a pride of lion came, 22 of them. Most of them were, of course, lionesses with male lions, but only one lion, the king of the jungle, came, and he hid in a bush. And the lionesses were near the calves. And the elephants started trumpeting and shooing off the lionesses. So this went on for the other 1.5, 2 hours. And ultimately, the lionesses just ran off from there, and the elephants, took their babies near them. And it was lovely to know who the true king of the jungle is. So it was
lovely.
Like that.
Lovely story. Thank you, Paramita.
Thank you.
Chris, go ahead. Your story. Can't hear you. You'll have to unmute. Unmute yourself, Chris. Hit the unmute. Yeah.
Ma'am, please increase your volume. Mic volume. Please increase your mic volume.
Chris, we'll come back to you in a second. Vinod, are you still there? Mr. Vinod Pillai?
Yeah, Julie.
Yes, hi. Thanks for your patience, Vinod. Go right ahead.
I must confess that this is one of those situations where I should keep my mouth shut. But then, I'll do my little bit to talk about what I've understood of, animals and birds. I grew up in Kerala. And in our house, we had a small grove kind of for snakes, where we used to have cobras and rat snakes and other snakes which would keep roaming around. And we'd have these mongooses going and, trying to just, dance around these snakes. And I'd be witnessing all this while centipedes and millipedes and spiders of all kinds would roam around inside. And we'll have civet cats jumping, below the tiled roof. That was a kind of place where I grew up. And we never looked at it as wildlife and humans and all that. They were there just like my cousins are there, and they existed, and we didn't bother about them. Once in a fortnight or something, somebody would come and, like these snake charmers in the north, they would play the bean, and, the whole day they would be there, and we would feed them, and they'd go place some milk in that snake grove for the snakes, and I would go with them and see what's happening. And this is how I grew up. So for us, the kind of experience I had is that, okay, they are there, just like my cousins and other friends and all that. These are also there. We never experienced any danger, and we never had any kind of problem then. Now, after my childhood, I started growing up in different cantonments all over India. One of the places I went to, it was absolutely uneventful, is only in Lucknow when I was growing up there, that one afternoon, I was just standing outside the house. We had a pretty large compound, and I was talking to my mother and brother. And while we were discussing something, I noticed a pretty bird on the terrace. And I don't know what happened to me. I had a stone in my hand. And perhaps those days, we used to be taken for all the NCC, shooting and all that. And I was pretty bad there. So there was this thing in my mind, that I need to improve. I need to be a better shot. So here I had the stone in my hand. I just looked at it, in a very absent-minded kind of way, talking to my mother, and then just aimed it at the bird. And in a second, I had that beautiful bird come down. And then my mother was shocked. She said, "What's happened to you? Well, what are you doing?" Because that's not the kind of thing she'd associate with me. I looked at it. I think it was a very beautiful bird. I think it's the Indian blue jay or the Indian roller bird. And I felt miserable. My mother didn't tell me anything because she was very fond of me. She wouldn't criticize me or anything. She just said, "Oh, what is this? Why?" And that stayed on with me. And that was the last time that I ever went anywhere, I usually stayed away from the wildlife. That's how my life has been. So that's why I said there's nothing much that I can add. I've been listening. It's been a great evening. I've been listening to all these fabulous stories, and I felt how poor my life is, and that I need to really enrich it a little bit at least.
That's a very, very touching story. And I think it resonates with some of us. If not us, I have siblings who I can relate that to. So thanks for that evocative tale. And I'm sure you've also evolved with that tale in your head over the years. Otherwise, you wouldn't feel comfortable sharing it. Chris, we'll just hang on a tick. I want to pass the baton on to my good old friend Saheli, who does enormous work. Apart from publishing, apart from editing, from being a poet, Saheli keeps us aware of the wildness within the city, of the city walks that she does, and the gardens and the animals that she promotes in her writings and in her talks. So Saheli, I'm very interested in knowing about your recent trip to Buxa.
Just before I speak about Buxa, I would like to say, no, it's okay. About Jane Goodall. Like we were speaking about Elsa and all. I had the good, opportunity to interact with her twice. Once when I was with the Baliganj Science College, incidentally, I did my MPhil in environmental science, as a result of which I got the opportunity to speak to her. And she has done phenomenal work on chimpanzees. We all of us know that. And very recently, she had actually come to Alipur Zoo and to see how the chimps here are. And she gave a very good note on it. And that was again a time when I was covering for an article. And that's why I again got the chance to, interact with her. But today I would like to share with you all a very heart-wrenching story, which I came across when I was visiting Buxa around 2018. That was the time which was before COVID, and usually people go to the forest of Gorumara and all, but they don't go to Buxa and Jayanti, especially because we don't get any kind of tigers over there. All the tigers have lost. They have gone. Now, where did they go? I mean, that was again something, a question which was there in my mind. As a result of which, luckily, I met a guide over there whose family migrated from Bihar in the 1800s. And he has helped a National Geographic team to work on this project of why the tigers have left Buxa. And he actually showed me how the ecological balance of the entire area was lost over the years due to the planting of certain trees like shal and shagun. He even told me, and he showed me actually, how the Britishers used to do all this logging. But what they did is they planted the trees which you get there in place of the trees they used to cut. But over the years after independence, since the 70s and 80s, the trees were cut down by illegal poachers, loggers, etc., and even by the government agencies. But the trees which came in their place were not the trees of that area. Because we know that shal and shagun, they were all trees. They are all trees which actually grow naturally in the dry areas, and they have a tendency of drawing large amounts of water and retaining it within themselves. And as a result of which, most of the water bodies in that area were dried up. And what happened in that place was actually the tigers did not have the water. They did not have the prey. They had to leave. And where did they leave? They crossed the Bhutan Hills, because just on the other side of Jayanti is the Bhutan Hills. And the minute they started crossing the Bhutan Hills, they were shot, they were poached, and all those bones were being sent to China from, Bhutan. And then from there, it was an excess of poachers. But the best part is, if I'm sure all of you know, very recently a tiger has been spotted in Buxa. Now, people do it in the trap cameras. Of course, I have personally done 2 or 3 articles on that very recently, talking to the forest rangers over there. They are very excited, but they are saying, there with a word of caution, that maybe the tiger which was spotted, and maybe 1 or 2 which might be spotted later on, are not the tigers which are living there. Maybe they have, migrated in search of food from the adjoining forests. But whatever it is, they are doing their level best. And the other point, only one pointer I want to make here, is the pachyderm-human conflict, which we have spoken earlier in this conversation. And I had presented a paper on this pachyderm conflict long back. And while doing that, I realized that a lot of good things are happening in West Bengal, especially in the Bankura range, where there's a lot of conflict between the elephants and humans. And they are sensitizing the villagers. Like if you are banging and if you're trying to push those cubs away, the herd away, many times we find that the cubs get into the ditch, they die, it's a kind of a conflict which can be dealt in a different way. And now it is being dealt in a different way. There are villagers who are being appointed by the government as elephant friends. They are called friends of elephants. And they are going from village to village, creating the kind of awareness which is needed. So I believe that, in order to get over this conflict, which will grow more and more, as many people before me has also spoken about, our aim right now should be how to get over this conflict. Otherwise, conservation of wildlife is not possible. So thank you, Julie.
Thank you so much, Saheri. And thank you for the work you're doing. Anushka, you've been mighty patient, but I think no one knows Gerald Durrell's My Family and Other Animals better than you. So what impact did that book have on you? And how do you look at the world now as a planet for your generation. Anushka is a very, very committed reader and interested in the performative arts and in ecology. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I think it's working. I think a lot of what I wanted to say has already been summarized. The two things stand out to me, and that's cohabitation and empathy. I didn't grow up around animals. I am very scared of dogs and cats. But when I read the memoir, that was the first time I realized that even a child or a grown-up could have those meaningful relationships with not just, the dogs and cats, but also with cockroaches and snakes. And we've had long discussions about this. The magpies, I think the magpies are magpies in the book, like they've been referred to as magpies. I think they were I love them the most. And after, you asked me, how did it impact me? I find myself being kinder to animals now. Because before, I read this book when I was in school, but this was the first time I actually studied it. And that's when I realized that, okay, you can learn empathy. Even when you're reading something, you can learn vicariously, and that's very important. And that's one of the tools that literature will help you with. It will teach you how to do things you've not known previously. And that, nowadays, I find myself giving space to animals. I didn't have that sort of understanding before this. When I see a lizard now, I know that, okay, I don't have to shoo it away. It can coexist, and so can I. I think that's something I've taken away from reading the novel, to just cohabit peacefully.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Anushka. If I might turn to Somnath and Urmi, who've been very kind. They're in Calcutta now, and I thought we'd pull them in. Urmi is actually an old friend from Jadavpur University days, where we both did our masters, but she's a chemical engineer. And let's see what she has to say about a different kind of wild thing. And I want you to listen with an open mind, because this story, the way she told it to me, I had my hair standing on end. And I thought it'd be good if we could include the story. So after you, we've got Somnath, who's also a scientist. So I don't know how you're going to portray your story. And then we will go to Sangeeta. So please, Urmi. No.
Can you hear me now? So this is a story long time back. It was in Calcutta, and I do not know whether y'all are sort of scared. You said encounters in your backyard. That's what I thought the topic was. Now, I had a very peculiar encounter in my backyard. I was in my maternal uncle's house in a summer vacation when I was 8-year-old. And in my mama's house, there used to be my mama, my masi, and my old grandmother, maternal grandmother, who had a visibility problem and a little walking problem. So they had appointed a girl about 14 years of age who used to help her with her chores. I actually was staying there and spending my summer vacation there. And suddenly, my mama had actually called my mother requesting her to send me there, because they were sent through, there was being stones hurled at my grandmother and that maid. The maid's name was Kalpuna, and it was being hurled we thought by local boys, because Kalpuna was about 14 years old. So we thought some miscreants troubling. But then they said that, I was the only spare person to go and actually observe whether actually those miscreants were boys or whether it was something else. But the way the house was, it was a little big house, mansion-like, and they had a huge garden at the back. Now, the way the stones started coming in, I was a little surprised that, the house was built just next to it, and that house, whatever windows were there was never opened. So how could the stone actually come inside the house and actually bang my grandmother, who had a visibility, seeing problem? So it happened once, it had happened twice right in front of my eyes. And then we didn't have an answer. And whenever I was in the room, it never used to happen. But when this girl Kalpana was alone or my grandmother was alone, it was happening. Till one day in the morning, I was actually sort of, playing with this girl, Kalpana, in one of the bedrooms on the bed. And my grandfather, who had passed away long back, he had a life-size portrait of him, placed between the two windows. So there's no way that, somebody could actually throw a stone and break that portrait of my grandfather. But as we were playing, there was two stones which came hurling around on my grandfather's photograph, and the glass sort of broke in small chips, but it did not damage the photograph of my grandfather. So we were really hassled. In the meantime, since all this was happening, it was actually very worrisome for my uncle, maternal uncle, my mama. And he actually went and told some of his friends that this is what is happening. So in my house. So one of them said that, why don't you go to, I went to the dictionary to see. In Bengali, we call it Ojha. And in English, they call it shaman. So the shaman is a lady who actually takes care of evil spirits. So we actually never believed in all this, So my mama just laughed it off. But when when this shaman, he spoke to her on the phone, that time it was only the landline. And he actually asked the shaman, what is your suggestion about it? He said, why don't you do one thing? In order to remove the idea whether it is the local miscreant boys, why don't you actually take 4 or 5 of these stones and paint them with chuna and keep it on the stairs from the first floor going to the second floor. So actually that chuna business was done right in front of my eyes. And every day morning, I was actually going and seeing whether the chuna stone was there on the flight of stairs, and it was there. And when my grandfather's portrait was actually broken, I found those 2 chuna stones had been used to, break the glass. So I actually immediately went and actually tiptoed and went and saw in that staircase that were 2 stones really missing. Yes, the 2 stones were really missing. So it wasn't by miscreants outside. It had happened from somewhere. Somebody had picked up the stone from within the house on the staircase, and it had actually banged. So that day I went to the phone, and, they had that normal dialing system, and I gave a call to my mama in his factory. And I said that, this is what has happened. And there was absolutely stunned silence. The whole house was extremely sort of worried. And, we were all feeling down. In the evening, my mama came up with that one simple lady whom they called Ojha. And my mama kept insisting that, please understand, we don't want any harm done to this girl because, I hear that you people beat up and this and that. I don't want any wrong to be done to this girl. She's from a known family. She's just come to help my mother. So the lady said, don't worry, I will not do any such thing. So then she said that, I don't want too many people around here. So it was actually a sort of lately built house. So it had a normal, huge drawing dining. And this Kalpana and my grandmother and my mama stayed in that drawing dining. And they lit a lamp and made Kalpana sit on a small mattress on the floor. And me and my Masi was actually pushed into the bedroom because the Ojha had said that I don't want too many people around. So, but we just couldn't keep our control of our, desire to know what is exactly happening over there. So we actually kept our ear to the door, both me and my Masi, to hear what was actually going on. And first, I heard that, she's saying, what is your name? Well, my name is Kalpana Mandal. Where do you stay? I have come from Burdwan. So which was actually her original place. Then she did something, then there was some silence and something she did. I do not know what she did. And then again, she asked, what is your name? She said a completely different name, which I heard. And both me and my Masi looked at each other. Then she says, where have you come from? She says, I've come from the north. And then where do you plan to go? I've planned to go to the east. Then she asked, why is it that you have come over here? Why are you troubling these people? She says, you know what? I used to be here long time back. And I do not, I suddenly passed this way. And I stopped over here, remembering
And I wanted to tell you that I was very hungry. So I wanted to eat something. So she said, why are you then disturbing these people? She said, because I am trying to draw their attention for a long time, but everybody in this family seems to be very busy. Nobody has the time to look at me. So she said, why did you break the glass of Baba? Means my grandfather. Then she says that because that is the only way I could draw attention from this family. So then she says, yes, then she says that, you know what, so what do you want? So then she says that I want just very few things. I want to actually sort of eat a good meal. So they were all shocked. What meal? You want a cooked meal or do you want an uncooked meal? Then she says, no, I want a cooked meal. And then she gave a list of things what she wanted to eat when the Ojha asked. And then she said that, do you mean to say that this is all that you want? Do you want to eat on a steel plate or do you want to eat in a mud plate? She said, no, mud plate is fine. Okay. And she wants, what, are you a woman or are you a man? She says, I'm a woman. I didn't know spirits had men or women, but that's the first time I heard I'm a woman and I'm a married woman. And she says, I want to wear a red sari and I want to have red ribbon. And I want to have some slippers, she said. Then she said, the fact that you're going to go away, how do we know that you're going to go away? Well, she said, then you get an umbrella and you go and where will you take the food? Then she says that, you know, there's a tree in that place next to the Mahakali temple, which we had never noticed in the past earlier. She says, I will just take it over there. You give it to me over there. And once I go, the umbrella will be gone. And I will break a twig of that tree and then I will go. Are you going to disturb these people after that again? She says, no, I will not disturb anybody after that, once my desires are quenched. Then she says that, you know what, how do you think we should celebrate this? This is all that shaman, that lady was asking. And everything was being spoken by Kalpana. Then she said that, no, I do not want to, I'm going to, Dada will go and buy rasgullas and I will give rasgullas to everybody. So she said, I can't do all this arrangement by tomorrow because today evening we are talking at 6:37. So is it okay that if we do it by day after tomorrow, are you going to trouble tomorrow again? She said, no, I have no intention of troubling. Then she says, fine, then day after tomorrow we'll do all your, we'll cater to all your needs. Then what happened is these people went away. This lady only arranged for everything. And my mama went and bought the rasgullas. My Masi actually cooked whatever food they wanted. And it was actually put on a plate. And that day morning, and I immediately that day evening, I went and asked Kalpana, what happened? Did you hear? What did you speak? What were you saying? I wanted to actually know whether actually what she had spoken is whether she remembers that. But she had no clue and no idea of what she had spoken. So I just decided, my Mausi said, don't disturb her in any manner. Then next day, right early in the morning, I found she went and, got up. She went downstairs to the servant's toilet and she went and had a bath. She came herself, she combed her hair, she took her sari. Nobody gave any instruction to her. She did everything on her own. She took that red colored thing that they put on the feet, that alta. She was not a married woman, but she put that alta. And she got ready. And then, my Masi had kept that food plate ready. She took that plate on her own and she started walking. And I was a young girl and she was my best friend at that time because she used to play with me. So I also started walking behind her. But my granny had to go with her with that rasgulla and thing like that. But my granny couldn't walk. So the car, that ambassador car, went carrying my granny over there. And she actually went and kept over there and kept it under the tree without any instruction. And she actually broke the, twig. She turned around. That lady, she gave water in her hand. She washed the hand. She took the rasgulla, thing from her, from my mama's hand, from my granny's hand. And she actually distributed rasgullas to all of us. I just was a young girl and I just couldn't resist the temptation to see what is actually happening around. So I turned my head to turn around to see actually who is the spirit. And I found just a simple dog eating that food, and we couldn't locate that umbrella also. And I mean, after that, my mama got married and then he had children. And I kept asking my, mama's kids that, do you think that you studied till late in the night? Did you ever get that inkling of the spirit? They never got any inkling, but I still have a fear of spirits even now when I go back to that house.
Only just one question. And the question I have for you is, who lived in that area? Did you once tell me that it was a army barrack?
Yeah, actually, that lady, she actually said that there's an army barrack over here, and I had stayed here at that time. And we actually did go and find out later that was there really an army barrack? Actually, there was an army barrack. The place actually is in the Tala Tank, you know, that is called Tara Shankar Sarani, that our Bengali author Tara Shankar Banerjee Bandyopadhyay used to stay on that lane. And there was many, maybe mid 1800s and all, there was an army barrack over there. And so such a thing did exist. But even when that place still exists, and even now when I go back to that place, I do feel scared.
Thank you, Urmi. Different kind of wild thing. Shomnath, you have a story?
You heard the story of the spirit. I keep getting reminded of it. I don't believe in spirits, right? And every time that I kind of voice the fact that I don't believe in it, my wife keeps telling me this story and said, no, they are there. So that's kind of, you know, very interesting aside to this. So, you know, I'm a city boy, okay? I grew up, and my idea of life other than human life used to be dogs and cats, which used to see, and some centipedes in my grandmother's house. That was the extent of my understanding of the other species, as it were. And then one fine day, I got transplanted to Powai, and somebody spoke about Powai. Powai is a lovely campus, beautiful campus, but you know, and this was early 70s, right? It's not the Powai of today, which is an urban jungle. This was a Powai where between the Powai campus and the L&T factory, you had nothing but just absolute green.
So for those who don't know Powai, it's the IIT.
Sorry, yeah, IIT Powai, IIT Bombay, yeah. IIT Bombay, not Mumbai, Bombay. So, yeah. So, you know, there used to be just verdant green and water was the Vihar Lake, and that was pretty much it. So I went to hostel number 4, and I thought, you know, the guy who was assigning the room thought he was doing me a favor by assigning me the corner room of the ground floor, you know. So it had an extra window. The problem with that was that when you opened the window, you had all the creepy crawlies and everything coming into the room. And I was not exactly trained to, you know, to appreciate that sort of living. So this is the story that one fine day I'd gone to have a bath, and, you know, you do your own stuff. So I had a little bucket and I had all my clothes, and dutifully I'd washed them and all that. And I was kind of walking back to my room when suddenly I saw an earthworm slide into my room. It was a rather fat looking earthworm, you know. So I said, oh my God, you know, this is an earthworm. But earthworms, so this is all processing going on in my mind. This is not the size of an earthworm that I've been used to. This is a fairly biggish looking earthworm. Maybe this is an earthworm, maybe this is not an earthworm. So I kind of went and asked somebody to come and just check it out. Yeah, there's nothing there. I refused to. By now, I was panic stricken. I said, if this guy leaves the room and I'm alone with this earthworm or the not earthworm, then that's not a funny situation. So I refused to let the guy go. I said, you hang around here till we find out whatever it is. You know, one of my prized possessions in my early days at Powai used to be, in those days, it used to cost 31 rupees. They used to be called hunter juto, you know. So it had kind of, you know, hiking shoes or whatever. So lo and behold, you know, right underneath that shoe, coiled in a pretty thing, was my earthworm, except it wasn't an earthworm. So anyway, that incident passed, and the snake was kind of moved out of the house. But now I was absolutely panic stricken. I said, I am not going to stay in this room anymore. I'm going to go anywhere but this room. Now, the problem was that I said, I'm not going to be on the ground floor because I've had whatever I wanted. I have to go up somewhere. The problem was there was only one other room available in the hostel, which was a single room, which was on the 3rd floor.
And somebody told me, you want to go to that room? I said, yes. You want to go to that room because you're scared of wildlife? I said, yes. He said, there's a wilder life over there. So I said, I don't care. By now I'm panic stricken, So I said, I don't care. I'm going up there. So I go up there, this wing of ours, I don't mind naming them. I hope none of you know any of them because it would be so unkind. There used to be all wonderful friends later, but at that moment, there used to be a guy. He was a Parsi guy. He used to be called Buji.
We have a Parsi guy right here.
No, that's fine. They're my good friends. That doesn't matter. But he was wild. And there was another guy whose name was Mammon. Okay. So Buji, he used to believe that I am this guy, and he used to come and just bang doors, and he used to really go at it. And this guy Mammon, he didn't do anything. He used to just laugh. I have never heard a more sinister laugh. In none of the Hindi movies did any laugh come anywhere close to Mammon's laugh. So here I was. I had escaped from one form of wildlife and I was right into the other form of wildlife. This was into my ragging period. So I couldn't go out of the hostel because I would get caught there. I couldn't stay inside the hostel because I had Buji and Mammon. And, everybody, and the guys from the other side of the other wings and all, they would look at me and said, ha, 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 have the time of your life. So I decided, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to lock the door. And there was a way of locking the door from the outside. I would lock the door and I would stay inside. So that was my kind of, introduction into wild and other forms of life. And we went on to really enjoying it. And but on a serious note, the campus was actually a lovely campus. Over time, we got used to having snakes and leopards and also, and we kind of had a better understanding. I'm still scared of them, but I have a better understanding of them even as I have that fear. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Sangeeta, last but not the least, and then we'll try and see if we can fit in Chris. I don't see her anymore, but Sangeeta, do tell. Sangeeta, I admire greatly. She's actually one of the few women tea tasters that I know. I'm sure there are several in the industry, but yeah, go ahead.
Right. So I won't talk about my profession because it's not related to the subject today. In fact, I sort of quickly read through I borrowed the book from Anju, and I thought I'd talk about the book, but everybody's related their personal experiences. So I'll do a bit of both. What was interesting is, 2 months ago, we did Ben Okri's book. Yes. And when I was reading your book, I went back to that book because both authors have used children as their protagonists for conservation. And what I'd like to say here is that, children are born with a natural affinity for animals, for nature. And I think it's this cruel world that detaches children and, removes them into the material and the urban, et cetera, et cetera. So coming back to myself, I was born in a tea garden. Well, there's I call her Auntie Roshni, this beautiful lady, but she's seen me born. And we were really born where in a terrain where there was thick forest, creatures great and small, and jungles and wildlife was just part of our life. I'll just relate a little story. And of course, this is about a domestic animal. My mother gave birth to me in Margarita Hospital. That's where we lived, right in the far northeast of Assam. And she had some gynecological issues. So, goat's milk is supposed to be very good for the baby. So I was fed goat's milk. And the goat stayed with my mother and me and the goat. And we had an English gynecologist. And she developed some medical issues. So we were moved to Dibrugarh Hospital, which was, a better and bigger hospital. So there was the doctor, my mother, the goat, and me. So so that was that's how I came into this world with goat's milk. So just relating, of course, that's not a wild animal. And we have many experiences of wild animals. One such was, we used to park our car and walk through the jungle and go to the riverbank for picnics. You remember those picnics we used to go for on the river? We used to go on boats. The boats used to capsize. We would almost die, but we would be alive, all of that. And one day we were walking through the forest and there was a wild elephant eating those elephant apples. And there were like 6 or 7 of us walking in the forest. So we had Uncle Ivan Rufus, who is now, well, he's no longer there. And he said, nobody's to be afraid. Oh, sorry, nobody's to be afraid. Just be still, everybody. And actually, none of us were afraid because it seemed so natural for the elephant to be there. It was his home. And we stopped and, we were all little children. And we just slowly, and this elephant started leading us, like as if to say, okay, I'm going to guide you out of the forest. And we followed the elephant and he led us to the edge of the forest. And we went into our Jeep and the elephant turned around and came back. It was, so when I was looking at that girl talk with the elephant in Thailand, I was reminded of that elephant that was so kind and we encountered in the middle of the forest. So just these 2 stories, because I think we've had a long evening.
Lovely. We're just off the mark after 8 o'clock. Do I see Chris there or has Chris left? I think Chris was very patient.
Yeah, she left, ma'am.
Okay, so we'll catch up next time. Vivek, Paramita, Vinod, thank you for your inputs. They were rich and wealthy and we'll carry them back with us.
Thank you.
So welcome. We'll be doing, exploring Salman Rushdie's Victory City. 23rd of May, I believe it is. Shivonti, are you there? Have you gone? Have I got the date right? 23rd of May. Thank you. So all of you, you're very welcome to meet up again right here. Actually, that will be a virtual meet, but we'll keep you informed. Thank you so much for coming and for all your inputs, and have a lovely night. Good night. Thank you. Thank you, Gurudash, and all my team here, the photographer, all the technicians, and of course, our dear librarian, Shebonti. Thank you so much.
I'd just like to say something. We've all talked about wildlife, and I've been all over the world, but now what I do is I draw wildlife, okay, and write short stories.
Please show it towards the camera. Please show it towards the camera.
One sec.
And please state your name.
My name is Shobita. There are huge canvases in my house. In fact, my house is full of animal paintings. I was basically a portrait painter, but a wildlife enthusiast once told me, why don't you try animals? And I said, no, I mean, bagh bhallu aakbo na. I didn't think I wanted to draw animals, but when am I showing it right? Yeah. So when I went all over the world to many safari parks and things like that, and especially to Ranthambore, I just fell in love with these animals. And yeah, so and then I saw, I'm not showing it correctly, I saw how many different kinds of tigers there are. I didn't know, I thought they all looked alike. And, it was very hard work, and they all looked so different from each other.
Lovely.
And
absolutely beautiful.
And
Shobita, we should actually, we're holding all these wonderful people.
And yeah,
maybe we should have you over another time.
Leopard. I write short stories for children.
Lovely.
And illustrate them with my own paintings.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. What a lovely ending.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good night, all. Good night.
Put our hands together and truly
thank you.